The way you end a news story is just as important as the way you begin it. The story ending is the last thought or piece of information you leave readers with. If a reader has bothered reading all the way to the end of your profile story or enterprise story or other story, you should reward them with a nice ending. A good ending should convey that the story is over and also resonate. It should stay with the reader and make them think a little bit. Hey, this is Professor Grabowski, and in this short video, I will discuss a few different ways you can end your journalism stories. But before I do that, let's talk about bad endings or story endings to avoid. First, you want to avoid what's known as a summary ending. As I've mentioned in many previous lectures, journalism is different than other types of writing. For example, when you write a term paper for a political science or sociology class, you might simply end it by saying, "in conclusion," and then proceed to briefly summarize what your paper was about. But we don't do that in journalism. The reason is, our stories are pretty short compared to academic papers. A profile story, for example, may only be 600 to 800 words long, and that's a far cry from a 20-page term paper. So you don't need to repeat information you already told readers in your relatively short story. Instead, you should leave readers with a new piece of information when you end your story. Secondly, you should also be careful to avoid another common mistake young journalists make when ending their stories, what's known as the sermonette ending. This is an ending that sounds like it's something you'd hear in a sermon. That's why it's called a sermonette ending. It's also usually opinionated. Here are some examples from previous students' stories. This was the ending for a profile story about a model. And it goes, "At the rate Nina's going, who knows? Maybe she will be the next big-time supermodel we see walking down the most famous Victoria's Secret runway." An ending like this is bad because it's an editorialized statement. Remember, in news writing, you want to keep your opinion out of the story. Here's another bad ending. This appeared in an enterprise story on the difficult job market graduating seniors face. The ending was, "Whether you lack experience or don't know the right people, job hunting isn't getting any easier for fresh college graduates anytime soon. But if you keep searching and applying, someone should eventually hire you." Again, this is a bad ending because it contains the writer's own commentary, and it sounds like a sermonette. So to recap, avoid ending your story with a summary, and avoid inserting your own opinion into the ending, or anywhere in the story for that matter. On the other hand, here are a few approaches that may work for your story ending. First, a quote ending is the most common type of ending in news stories. If you look at the sample profile and enterprise stories written by previous students that I posted on our course site, you'll notice that most of them feature a quote ending. Now, you shouldn't end with just any quote, but one that either ties up the story nicely, looks ahead to the future, or leaves the reader with something to ponder. And the quote must be from a source in your story, not some famous quote you found on Google. For example, this story on the screen is a profile story about a college swimmer who is openly gay. The story talks about the difficulties and bullying he faced in high school, but then discusses how he felt accepted when he came to Adelphi University, and the positive impact he's had on both the swim team and the student body at the college. The story ends with a quote that nicely reflects on his journey. It says, "I have never been more happy with my life than now," he said. "Being gay comes with a lot of unnecessary baggage, but it's who I am. I feel blessed to have found a home here at Adelphi with friends who accept me for who I am." Another possible way to end a story is what's known as a detail ending. You can end with a specific detail, a concrete image, a fact or a statistic to conclude the story by implication. For example, the Tampa Bay Times wrote a story about a police officer who was nearly killed while on patrol, and the permanent impact that trauma left on her. In short, what happened was the officer responded to a call, and while she was investigating, someone came up from behind her and attempted to shoot her. but the gun didn't go off, so she survived. But it left her with post-traumatic stress disorder, and it led to her changing the way she lives. So the story talks about that, and it ends with an anecdote about the impact this experience has had on her. The ending says, Lisa rarely thinks of Eugene, although she refuses to leave her back exposed, even while having dinner at a restaurant. Her back is always against the wall. So the implication is that this near-death scare has permanently scarred this police officer. And even when she's out enjoying dinner in a restaurant, she's afraid to sit with her back to the door in case if someone comes up from behind her and catches her by surprise. Okay, a third way you can consider ending your story is by coming full circle. Your ending in some way should refer back to the beginning of the story, but not repeat it, so that your new story comes full circle. For example, back in 2012, when Barack Obama was president and Steve Jobs of Apple was still alive, the New York Times wrote a story about how Obama had invited all of the big tech CEOs to the White House for a dinner. And the story says how he asked Steve Jobs why Apple was making its iPhones in China instead of the United States. And Jobs explained why he decided to outsource iPhone production jobs to China. The story goes on to explain that, for example, when Apple had created its latest iPhone and Jobs was playing around with the prototype, he noticed the screen scratched easily. And being the perfectionist he is, Jobs insisted the screen be changed at the last second so that it wouldn't scratch. And this came right before the phone was set to be sold to the masses. So this required a lot of work and flexibility to pull off, and that wouldn't have been possible if the phone was made in the United States. And the story details why production is more efficient in China. And then the article concludes with this anecdote. It says, before Mr. Obama and Mr. Jobs said goodbye, the Apple executive pulled an iPhone from his pocket to show off a new application, a driving game, with incredibly detailed graphics. The device reflected the soft glow of the room's lights. The other executives, whose combined worth exceeded $69 billion, jostled for a position to glance over his shoulder. The game, everyone agreed, was wonderful. There wasn't even a tiny scratch on the screen. So the story comes full circle. It harkens back to that earlier part about Jobs being upset about the scratches on the phone screen and demanding that all iPhones be fixed at the last minute before they were sold. So that's an example of a circle ending. Well, we've now come full circle in this presentation. Once again, this has been Professor Grabowski. Thanks for watching.